Good evening. Today is July 22nd, and this is Kingdom News. My name is Siobhan Singh, and here are the headlines for today. Pro-Life Center opens across from largest Planned Parenthood in Texas. God pointed us there. Virginia governor urges caution after COVID-19 breaks out at churches in 7 counties. And in India, Christians who refuse to worship false gods are beaten by tribal Ammonists. Now for the news in detail. When Leanne Jameson, head of the Prestonwood Pregnancy Center, was asked to adopt a struggling pregnancy center in Southwest Dallas, she never imagined what God had in store. About 2 years ago, a young woman I had been mentoring asked me to adopt the pregnancy center she was over, Jameson recalled. The pregnancy center was struggling financially and they were going to have to close their doors. There were a lot of reasons as to why I thought it wasn't the best move for us, but God just wouldn't let it go. The pregnancy facility in need of assistance was just 2.5 miles away from Planned Parenthood, largest abortion center in Texas, which performs both surgical and medical abortions. Despite her reservations, Jameson knew God was calling her to ensure a pregnancy center remained in that area. After agreeing to adopt the facility, Jameson was met with several obstacles. She says the pregnancy center needed a great deal of renovation. It was needing a new roof, and there was going to have to be an investment of funds into that location to really make it what it needed to be. While scouting the area for a new location, one of Jameson's colleagues asked her, if you could move the center anywhere, where would you move it? She says, I pointed to a building across the street from Planned Parenthood's largest abortion center in Texas and said I would put it right there. At the time, it felt like a reach because it wasn't available, but I felt like God was saying, this is where I want this ministry, and the time is now. Just a few months later, something miraculous happened. The building directly across the street from Planned Parenthood became available. She says love is going to be what makes abortion unthinkable. I want to be so vastly different than the center across the street that women notice that difference. The foundation of Christ is going to be what really ultimately sets us apart from Planned Parenthood, in addition to the fact that at our facility, women will get the truth with love and grace wrapped around it, she says. Cases of COVID-19 related to churches have been identified in Grant, Loganwood, Boone, Kanawha, Raleigh, and Taylor counties. Dr. Sherry Young, health officer and executive director of the Kanawha Charleston Health Department, urged churchgoers to practice caution after leaders at North Charleston Apostolic voluntarily agreed to close for 3 weeks to deep clean their building as congregants were asked to self-isolate. I know these things are really difficult to do, Justice said, but for right now, they have to be done because if we don't, all we're going to do is lose more people. We could very well lose a lot of our grandmothers and grandfathers, people who have so much wisdom to still continue to pass on. We absolutely don't need to be losing these great West Virginians. Total Animus in India brutally beat 3 Christian families before driving them from the village over the believers' refusal to participate in celebrations in honor of the tribal deities. Morning Star News reports that on May 20th, the family of Bhima and Devi Markham were asleep in their beds in Devkapuli Para, Chhattisgarh state, when a mob of 15 villagers who followed the local tribal religion broke into their home and began beating them with wooden batons. The family was forced to flee their home while the mob vandalized their belongings and threw away their food. Angered by the Christians' refusal to participate in celebrations in honor of the tribal deities. Animists worship gods based on ancestors, spirits, and nature. The assailants then beat Christians Chenna Markham and Joga Kunjam and their families, along with an unidentified elderly Christian woman, also driving them from their homes. The 3 families, including 3 children and the elderly sister, a total of 14 injured Christians, fled from Devkopali Para in different directions, fearing for their lives, the pastor said. The families traveled 2 miles on foot before reaching Kash Yap's home. When they arrived, they were profusely bleeding, according to the pastor. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom on April 28 urged the U.S. State Department to add India as a country of particular concern to its list of nations with poor records of protecting religious freedom. Christian Adoption, Foster and Orphan Care Ministry Lifeline Children's Services launched its annual fundraiser Stand for Orphans this month. But COVID-19 is making the orphan crisis more than a crisis, says Executive Director Herbie Newell. Newell and his family kicked off Stand for Orphans on July 9th, inviting children of all ages to raise funds for the 153 million orphans in need worldwide. The Birmingham-based adoption, foster, and orphan care ministry, however, has been forced to offer alternative ways for families to raise money because of the global pandemic. Lifeline Children's Services is encouraging people to be creative on how they go about garnering support. Stand for Orphans, which began in 2015, raised over $500,000 in the past 5 years and has amassed national support. Their work has helped them gain matching donations and partnerships with organizations such as Chris Tomlin's Angel Armies. COVID-19 had been a complete game changer in so many ways. It has even affected the way we can do Stand for Orphans this summer. While some families will continue to try and put on a traditional stand in their neighborhood, the fear for most is just too great. Knowing that the landscape has changed this summer, we are offering virtual stands where kids can do bake sales, use their talents to earn money, or sell jewelry and crafts online, said Newell. We also see 6 practical things we can do as illustrated in Ruth 2 by What Boaz Does for Roots. 1. Take notice of orphans. 2. Provide for orphans' needs, including food, shelter, clothing, and essentials. 3. Affirm and bless orphans. 4. Protect orphans and advocate for their safety by making them a priority and not a burden. 5. Honor orphans and serve them with your time, talent, and abilities. And 6. Invite orphans into your family, said Newell. A California church is suing Governor Gavin Newsom for banning all indoor church services, including Bible studies and singing, saying the restrictions violate their religious freedom. The church has many life groups, which are home Bible studies and fellowship groups where people come together to share and learn about the Word of God. These are now forbidden under Governor Newsom's recent orders. CBN News previously reported that Newsom announced on July 13th that all indoor gatherings, including church services, must cease due to an increase in the number of COVID-19 cases. Liberty Counsel, a religious rights law group, is representing the church and points out that the government's actions are contradictory, as he recently encouraged thousands of people to gather for protests against social injustice. Written in the 74-page lawsuit, the church declares that in times of trouble and distress, members are to sing to the Lord even more and to sing aloud to Him. Lead pastor Chi An defended the church, saying, "I want us to pray right now that we will win that court case. No one is above the Constitution. No one is above the law. As a pastor, I believe we have been essential for 2,000 years." Harvest Rock, which has more than 100 affiliated churches throughout California, states that it cannot fulfill its vital ministry and sincere religious beliefs without gathering together in person, and that it cannot effectively engage in its constitutionally protected free exercise of religion on the internet. Just a few miles away from Jerusalem's Old City, archaeologists have unearthed an administrative storage center from the time of Kings Hezekiah and Manasseh about 2,700 years ago. The excavation was conducted by Israel Antiquities Authority in the Armona neighborhood of Jerusalem. Researchers found an unusually large structure made of stone walls believed to have been used for governmental activities. There, they discovered 120 jar handles with seal impressions on them in ancient Hebrew. Many of the handles have LMLK, which means belonging to the king, inscribed on them. Other handles have the names of senior officials and other important men on them. Archaeologists say this is the most important collection of seals to be found in Israel in recent years. They believe the site was once used by the Jewish government to collect taxes, manage and distribute food supplies, and was surrounded by agricultural plots and orchards. The archaeological discoveries at Armona identify the site as a key site, the most important in the history of the final days of the Kingdom of Judah and of the return to Zion decades after destruction of the kingdom. This site joins a number of other key sites uncovered in the area of Jerusalem, which were connected to the centralized administrative system of the Kingdom of Judah from its peak until its destruction, he says. China said Wednesday that the U.S. has ordered it to close its consulate in Houston in what an official called an outrageous and unjustified move that will sabotage China-U.S. relations. The unilateral closure of China's consulate general in Houston within a short period of time is an unprecedented escalation of its recent actions against China, Wang said at a Daily News briefing. There was no immediate confirmation or explanation from the U.S. side. Besides its embassy in Beijing, the U.S. has 5 consulates in mainland China, according to its website. They are Shanghai, Guangzhou, Chengdu, Wuhan, and Xinjiang. Media reports in Houston said that the authorities had responded to reports of a fire at the Chinese consulate. Witnesses said that people were burning paper in what appeared to be trash cans, the Houston Chronicle reported, citing police. Police were told that the occupants were given until 4 p.m. Friday to leave the property, the Chronicle said. Houston police said in a tweet that officers responded to a meet the firefighter call at the Chinese consulate building at 3417 Montrose Boulevard. The tweet said that smoke was observed in an outdoor courtyard area and that officers were not allowed to enter the building. 14 people were injured and 1 person was in custody, and additional suspects were being sought after gunfire erupted outside a funeral home on Chicago's South Side, where at least 1 squad car was present, police officials said on Tuesday. Fire Deputy Superintendent Eric Carter said mourners outside a funeral home were fired upon from a passing SUV. Carter says several targets of the shooting returned fire. The SUV later crashed and the occupants fled in several directions. 1 person of interest has been taken into custody. Carter says all the victims were adults. The victims were taken by the Chicago Fire Department to nearby hospitals in serious condition. We thought it was a war out here, Guido told the Chicago Sun-Times. He says it's ridiculous all the shooting that's going on out here. It really has to stop. Carter said at least 60 shell casings were found at the scene of the shooting. It wasn't immediately known if anyone other than the attendees of the funeral were victims, nor if anyone in the SUV had been wounded. The person in custody was uninjured, according to the authorities. A squad car was assigned to monitor the funeral as a precaution because of the sizable number of mourners attending, Carter said, adding that he was unaware of any warnings from community activists that trouble at the funeral was imminent. The shooting comes as the Department of Homeland Security is planning to deploy dozens of federal agents to Chicago to deal with an uptick in violent crime in the city. Trump has framed such protests in the nation's large cities as a failure by liberal Democrats who run them, praised the officers' actions, and said he was looking to send other agents to other cities. He pointed to rising gun violence in Chicago, the nation's 3rd largest city, where more than 63 people were shot, 12 fatally over the weekend. Pointing to the U.S. Constitution and state law, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton last week issued a letter prohibiting local governments from closing private religious schools during the pandemic. The letter, issued July 17th, addressed to religious private schools in Texas, said Paxton acknowledges the robust constitutional and statutory protections unique to religious individuals and communities at all times. Local governments, he said, are prohibited under the governor's orders from closing Christian and other religious schools during the pandemic. Matt Staver, founder and chairman of the legal group Liberty Counsel, applauded Paxton's guidance. He says, I am pleased to see Texas Attorney General Paxton reminding local governments of the Constitution, Staver said. He says many have operated as though the Constitution is quarantined during a pandemic, but I have news. The Constitution is alive and well. Police in Fairfax County, Virginia arrested a suspect Saturday in the stabbing of two people at a Bible study at a well-known church in Chantilly. Both injuries were reported as non-life threatening. Chance Harrison, 32, of South Riding, was arrested and charged with 2 counts of aggravated malicious wounding, 1 count of felony assault on a police officer, and 1 count of misdemeanor assault. Police say Harrison entered Grace Covenant Church in Chantilly in the afternoon Saturday as the church was hosting an educational event. He stabbed 1 person, a staff member, without provocation, police said. A man then intervened and also was stabbed by Harrison, the Fairfax County Police Department said on its blog. Harrison has subsequently confronted and subdued by Chief Edwin C. Rosset and several officers. A knife believed to have been used by Harrison was recovered from the scene. Rosset, who is a member of the church, received minor injuries. He restrained Harrison until other police officers arrived. We are in prayer for all the injured. We are grateful for the courage exhibited that prevented worse from happening, Grace Covenant Pastor Brett Fuller said in a statement. He continued, lastly, we want to thank the broader community for their outpouring of concern and support in this time. Christians in China were detained by officials with China's Communist Party by passing out gospel tracts in order to cease all religious activity or risk losing social welfare benefits. A Christian in Jiangxi province recently told persecution watchdog China Aid that previously believers were permitted to openly share their faiths. Now doing so invites severe repercussions from local authorities. On July 3rd, the 2 Christians in Zhejiang province, Zhu Hu, who were sharing the gospel on the streets, were taken by the police and detained for 10 days. Also in July, more than 10 Christians were placed under administrative detention in Jiangsu for passing out gospel tracts on the streets, a local pastor said. Fearing further repercussions, those who were released did not share the details of their detention, the pastor told China Aid. He says in the past they would share what happened to them. Now they dare not share. Before they were released, they were threatened by the police that they would be detained again or that their social welfare would be stopped. While the churches used to speak up about the detention, now more than 90% of churches choose to stay silent. Previous reports have revealed how communist authorities use low-income Christians' reliance on government assistance to coerce believers to renounce their faith. It was earlier reported that communist officials ordered Christians who receive social welfare payments from the government to replace crosses, religious symbols, and images in their homes with portraits of China's communist leaders. If Christians resisted the order, officials annulled their subsidies. A member of Three Self Church in one of the villages told religious magazine Bitter Winter that local officials tore down all religious couplets and a calendar with an image of Jesus in his home and posted a portrait of Mao Zedong instead. A Pakistani Christian teenager who was kidnapped and forced into an Islamic marriage last year is now pregnant and confined to one room by her abuser, an attorney representing her family has said. Tabassum Yusuf, a lawyer representing the parents of 15-year-old Huma Yunus, told the Catholic Charity Aid to the Church in Need International that the teenager informed her parents by phone that she's pregnant after being repeatedly raped by the man who abducted her. Asked by her father if she could leave her abductor's house and return to her parents' home, she told him that she's not allowed to leave the house and that her life has become still more difficult, Yusuf explained. He says she is now in prison within the walls of one room. Yunus was taken from her home on October 10, 2019 at the age of 14 and later forcibly married to a radical Muslim man named Abdul Jabbar. She was also forced to convert to Islam. Yunus' parents have declared the marriage between their daughter and her captor to be invalid because she's not of legal age to consent to the marriage, which is 18 under the Sin Child Marriage Restraint Act. According to Yusuf, Jabbar's brother Mukhlia is a member of the Pakistani Security Forces Rangers branch and has threatened to kill the teenager's parents if they intervene. This man has contacted Huma's parents via video telephone calls and threatened them directly, showing them his weapons and telling them he would kill them if ever they should come looking for their daughter, Yusuf said. He continues, the same man, Mukhtar, has added in audio messages that even if all the Christians should band together to bring Huma back, he would kill both her parents and anyone who tried to help them. According to the Pontifical Foundation, the family's case had previously been closed by the third judicial magistrate for Karachi East on the grounds of a lack of proof, even though the family submitted a sworn statement from Huma School and a baptism certificate from St. James Church in Karachi showing the child's date of birth was in May 2005. The family appealed the decision. Upon appeal, the magistrate was said to have contacted Pakistani's official Public Records Authority to obtain the girl's birth certificate. Film and television mogul Tyler Perry is helping to bring unity in Atlanta after social unrest tore through the city following the police-involved death of Rayshard Brooks this year. The Tyler Perry Studios founder brought 1,000 Kroger's supermarket gift cards to bless the local community and asked the Atlanta Police Department to be the ones to hand them out. Tyler Perry says this is about the good police officers who do their job well every day, some of whom are my personal friends, in a statement. He continues, this is about trying to bridge unity in a city that adopted me and held me up high enough to reach my own branch on the tree of success. Photos on Twitter this month shows the officers of the Atlanta Police Department going door to door with Perry's donations. He says 500 food boxes were distributed to families in need this morning during the grocery giveaway event at the Dunbar Recreation Center, the department shared last week on Twitter. Tyler Perry donated 1,000 Kroger gift cards to give out to the community. Thanks to all those who stopped by and to our partner agencies, APD Cares and We Love ATL. Protests grew increasingly violent following the shooting death of Rayshard Brooks in a Wendy's parking lot in Atlanta. Brooks' shooting compelled Perry to pay for his funeral and supply college tuition for all 4 of Brooks's children. Due to his personal relationship with the local police, Perry thought to try and bring unity between the people in his new home and the authorities. The government of the United Kingdom has updated its guidance regarding mask wearing in houses of worship to prevent further spread of the coronavirus amid the ongoing pandemic. The guidance, which was updated last week, now says that more than 30 people are permitted to gather and pray outside provided that social distancing takes place and a risk assessment occurs. The guidance reads, the number of people who are able to gather will be dependent on the size of the space available. Any risk assessment should also consider the security of worshippers. This may require involving local partners such as the police. The wearing of face coverings in churches or other houses of worship and any other enclosed public spaces where people interact with those with whom they don't meet normally is now encouraged. Masks remain required in places like supermarkets, retail shops, and on public transportation until Friday. Places of worship play an important role in providing spiritual leadership for many individuals and in bringing communities and generations together. However, the communal nature also makes them places that are particularly vulnerable to the spread of the coronavirus, the guidance document states. Regarding singing, whether gathering outside the guidelines suggests that small groups of professional singers be able to sing in front of worshippers. Non-professionals, meaning those participating in performing arts other than for work purposes, should not engage in group singing at all, the guidance suggests. For indoor gatherings, one individual only should be permitted to sing or chant, and the use of plexiglass screens should be considered to protect worshippers from them. As this will further prevent transmission and the screen can easily be cleaned. When music plays a big part in worship and recordings are available, we suggest you consider using these as an alternative to live singing. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards, a Catholic Democrat, has encouraged residents in the state to follow his lead and participate in 3 days of fasting and prayer for those affected by COVID-19. At a press conference updating Louisianans about the coronavirus on Thursday, Edwards announced his intention to engage in 3 days of fasting and prayer beginning on Monday and concluding on Wednesday. The governor said he received a request to participate in this form of spiritual diet and exercise during a conference call with hundreds of pastors across the state of Louisiana. Edwards urged his fellow Louisianans to please join me and the First Lady and faith leaders across Louisiana, regardless of your denomination or your religion, and we would ask that you join us in prayerful reflection and fasting. He says we'll be doing lunch fasting for those 3 days and certainly praying as well, praying for the people of Louisiana, praying for those who are sick, praying for those who care for those who are sick, and certainly praying for the families of those who have passed on. Edwards had previously called on Louisianans to join him in their fasting and prayer in late March, when the coronavirus pandemic first began to grip the United States, the Catholic News Agency reported. His latest call for fasting and prayer comes as the state has recorded more than 13,000 new coronavirus cases in the last week. With a population of more than 4.6 million people, some 90,000 Louisianans have tested for the coronavirus positively, and 3,543 have reportedly died of complications from the virus. The state has the 12th highest number of coronavirus cases among all 50 states and ranks number 11 in the number of coronavirus deaths, according to the New York Times. Archbishop Gregory Aymon of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of the New Orleans issued a statement in support of Edwards, inviting us to pray and fasting. He says, we know that God hears our prayers and we must cooperate with him in doing our part to make certain that we do not spread the virus. Back in March, Aymon announced that he had tested positive for the coronavirus. As Catholic News Agency reported, Aymon was the first U.S. bishop known to have tested for the virus. The CDC is now saying COVID-19 infections have been undercounted. The latest data shows that more than 3.8 million coronavirus infections have been reported in the US. However, that number may actually be 10 times higher. The CDC has been collecting blood samples, and the latest batch of 150,000 samples from 10 cities and states indicates that more people had the virus than anyone realized. On the other hand, that appears to be positive news because it means that many more people who contracted the disease don't have symptoms. It also means the percentage of deaths caused by the virus is lower. On the other hand, it means more people could be spreading the disease to at-risk of individuals without realizing it. And the pandemic isn't slowing down in hotspots across the country as the death toll keeps rising. According to the COVID-19 tracking project, more than 1,000 Americans died from the virus on Tuesday. It's been almost 2 months since the U.S. last saw a daily death toll of 1,000. In his first press conference on the topic in 3 months, President Trump warned the crisis is far from over and called on Americans to take precautions. He says it will probably, unfortunately, get worse before it gets better. Something I don't like saying, but that's the way it is, Trump said. He says we are imploring young Americans to avoid packed bars and other crowded indoor gatherings. Be safe and be smart. He asked Americans to use masks, practice social distancing, and be wise about personal hygiene. He says we're asking everyone that when you are not able to socially distance, wear a mask, get a mask. Whether you like a mask or not, they have an impact. They'll have an effect, and we need everything we can get, he added. The president remain optimistic toward the development of a vaccine and the treatments for the virus. Unrest is shaking the streets of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv in the wake of a second wave of the coronavirus, as thousands of people gather to protest Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his government. Dozens of protesters chained themselves together and blocked the entrance to Israel's parliament on Wednesday morning. They were there to demonstrate against the controversial law under review that will give Netanyahu's government sweeping powers until June 2021 to impose wide-ranging virus restrictions on the population without parliamentary oversight. Police arrested 4 people and broke up the gathering. The incident comes just hours after a night of intense protest against Netanyahu. A coalition of more than 2,000 protesters coordinated with Israeli police to organize a legal demonstration in front of the Prime Minister's official residence in Jerusalem Tuesday evening. They were outraged with the leader's handling of the coronavirus outbreak. They danced, beat drums, and called for Netanyahu's resignation. A small group of Netanyahu supporters held a counter-protest nearby. Meanwhile, on Balfour Street, two demonstrations took place. One gathering drew restaurant owners and celebrity chefs who are frustrated with the government's contradictory shutdown policies for their businesses. We decided to act because on Friday we got news in the morning that we have to shut down. Then in the afternoon we got news that we can operate again until Tuesday. In the middle, we heard two different other decisions. So we have the feeling that nobody's driving the car and this car is about to go into Iraq, Jonathan Borowitz, chef and owner of M25 restaurant, told 24 News. Another group of demonstrators voiced outrage over Netanyahu serving as prime minister while being on trial for corruption. Dozens also called for justice over the killing of unarmed autistic Jerusalem man Iyad Halak, who was shot by police in May. There are new allegations from the Justice Department concerning a Chinese hacking operation reaching the US and around the world, this time targeting important research into the coronavirus vaccine. A grand jury returned an 11-count indictment against two hackers who have allegedly been operating for more than a decade. Authorities say the Chinese residents named Li and Dong trained in computer application technologies and have hacked hundreds of private and government systems worldwide. That includes targets related to COVID-19 treatment, testing, and vaccine development. Officials rattled off case after case. They were doing reconnaissance in a Massachusetts firm involved in COVID-19 vaccine research, said Bill Hyslop, U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Washington State. Likewise, they did the same for a Maryland firm involved in biotech research. Officials said the hacking is twofold, for the men's own financial benefit and to help the Chinese Communist Party. The investigation revealed two important trends. China is using cyber intrusions as part of its rob, replicate, and replace strategies to technological development, said John Demers, Assistant Attorney General. He says China is providing a safe haven for criminal hackers who are doing so for their own personal gain but are willing to help the state. The hacking was first discovered on the Department of Energy computers in Washington state. Authorities say the investigation took such a long time because the men covered their steps well. After discovering hundreds of millions of dollars stolen in trade secrets and intellectual property, the FBI is sending a strong message. Ivanka Trump said she had a great day volunteering at the faith-based DC Dream Center, helping to pass out food to communities and families impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. Great day volunteering at the local DC Dream Center and distributing farmers to families food boxes to the last mile of need, Ivanka tweeted. This program is creating a link between hungry families and struggling farmers affected by COVID-19. CBN News reported that the first daughter helped load milk, produce, and meat into some 500 boxes. This administration is proud of the collaborative efforts of farmers, distributors, food banks, nonprofits, and faith-based communities and their workforces in dispersing fresh produce, protein, and dairy to those most in need across the United States, Ivanka said in a press release in June about the program. Pastor Paula White, who has served as one of Trump's spiritual advisors, also joined the president's daughter at the DC Dream Center. The families have never received this quality of food, and if you could see the smiles, the tears, and the testimonies, it makes a world of difference, White said. The USDA Farmers to Families Food Box is part of the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. Some $3 billion has been earmarked to buy fresh produce, dairy, and meat from American farmers and ranchers. Here's a recap of today's news. Pro-Life Center opens across the largest Planned Parenthood in Texas, saying God pointed us there. West Virginia governor urges caution after COVID-19 breaks out at churches in 7 counties. And in India, Christians who refuse to worship false gods are beaten by tribal animus. The news today was obtained from the Christian Post, CBN News, Christian Headlines, and Charisma. My name is Siobhan Singh, and this is Kingdom News. Until next time, do have a good evening.